All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Chris. I'm over on the content side of things at L2L. This is Willemijn. She is solving the mysteries of product, but in reality, what she really does is serve as an ambassador for the frontline workforce in the world of tech. We're so happy to have her here, joined by our guest this week. This is Jason Anthoine. He is a frontline culture expert. He dives into the things that keep our factory floors ticking from the human perspective. Jason, do you want to say a couple words about what you're all about and what you do for people at on the factory floor in manufacturing?
Yeah, great. It's good to see you both this morning. Thanks for having me on.
Likewise.
Um, sort of like you, Wilhelmine, I wake up every morning and think, there are a lot of people going into the office today and going into the shop today and going onto the floor today. What can I do to help make that a better day? Like that's really all I'm focused on is how to help companies, large or small, regardless of the industry, figure out how to inform, involve, and inspire their employees. And when you've got that and you're doing really well, that's what people call culture. And if you're doing it really, really well, then that's what people call success. And so I spend all day long trying to figure out how to make those two things happen for anybody who might want it.
That is a great explanation. I'm
Yeah,
a big fan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
that resonates with us as well. So, we have a few different topics today, but first of all, I'm going to go completely off script. Jason, there's something on your website that I could not get out of my head. What is
Same.
what is nailing jello to the wall?
Yeah.
Well, there's probably a lot of people who will be listening to this who know exactly what that is. And it feels like, you're trying to take this nebulous concept that some people have put kind of a definition around and literally stick it up on the wall with the idea being it's not fluid, it's a static thing. We can put it up there, we can admire it, we can try to understand it, we can demystify it. But the reality is that as soon as you try to actually nail Jello to the wall, it's going to start sliding
Just
and
slides.
dripping and leaving all kinds of marks. And it's more fluid than you think it is. And so whenever you're trying to do that, it's a fool's errand. And as my old boss used to say, if you can't fix it, feature it. So figure out some way to feature the
Favorite.
fact that it is fluid and get used to it and work with it instead of trying to work against it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds challenging and it sounds like it applies to a lot of elements in
Uh,
manufacturing and in
yeah,
manufacturing tech, more
definitely.
than just culture.
Yeah, yeah.
So, speaking of challenges, what I kind of wanted to start out with is that we talk a lot about the way that manufacture is changing. It's a very different landscape from 20 years ago. It's also an extremely different landscape than it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And I want to hear from you from a cultural perspective. What is the single biggest challenge in manufacturing that we're facing in 2025 that we weren't facing in 2015 or 2020? And
Mhm.
why is there such an urgency to solving these kind of problems?
Yeah. Wow. So, if I can remember back 10 years ago, feels like around that time I was head of comms for the energy management division of GE. So GE had 7 businesses globally, and we were one of them. And all of GE, including our division, we were all talking about the Internet of Things and connecting all of our products and devices together, not just to each other, but to any other products and devices that may be, part of that whole, physical network of devices across however it is you might be trying to move electricity or monitor electricity, things like that. And so you know, that was an unusual thing for a mainline sort of 100-year-old manufacturing company to be talking about was the Internet of Things and how to make these things talk to each other and look at all this data we can get and then what are we going to do with it when we get it, which kind of started to me this sort of tipping point of all right, now that all these things are connected and can talk to each other, what does all that mean? And how are we going to adjust, not just, manufacturing floor, how we get things done, but cultures, how people interact with those things, all that sort of stuff. And so, as Malcolm Gladwell will say, that's the tipping point, to me at least, over the last 10 years of, all right, we knocked that domino over. Not only has it knocked others over, but as it continues to knock others over, it gets faster and faster and faster. So that, 10 years ago, maybe we were talking about change and we were thinking about change. It was, months, maybe years, depends on how big the initiative is. Now, change, that's for babies. Like now it's all about disruption, and it's constant disruption. So like we're thinking about, what was it like 10 years ago or 5 years ago? The reality is, what was it like 5 minutes ago when we first started this conversation? Because it has now been disrupted since then. So I think the difference now is that it's not just about the change, it's about disruption, and the fact that it is almost constant in a way that sort of big change maybe isn't. And the fact that you can be disrupted, you can be a disruptor, you can play both roles. Most of the day you have to. And so to me, it's just the speed of all this that has been, sort of activated by all these platforms and technology, all of which are fantastic. But that has made those dominoes fall even faster and probably further than you wanted them to, which to me is the big difference between now and 5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago. That's interesting. Yesterday was a great example, right? There's a new type of AI released, DeepSeek, into the market,
Yes.
and had a domino effect throughout a lot of supply chain, including manufacturing shares, right? So a huge domino effect. I'm really curious to see what's happening this week. But you made an interesting point, right? You said one of the things that happened like 10 years ago, you were talking about the reality that because of the availability of because of connectivity, we were amazed by all the data that we're going to get. So that led me to think like, but from a people perspective, what has happened? Because, looking myself back in the last 10 years, yes, we made a lot of technology available, but what has the effect been that it had on people? I think when I look through my lens, on one end, I see great possibilities, but executed badly. Like we got into years of, we want more data. Hey, data can control people. Let's infinitely make work at the manufacturing floor more complex by throwing either complex technologies at them, making it more like control focus. Like we want the data, so we want to control what we're doing so we can learn. But it didn't enable people. So actually, when you look at the data, productivity in manufacturing floors have stagnated since then. So we threw a lot of technology in manufacturing and we're not reaping the benefits. So my question to you is that from your employee experience perspective, what can you tell me a bit? Like, what are some of the good and the bad that you've seen?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent point, because we've spent a lot of time and money and resources connecting all the things together. And then once the things were connected together, we connected the people to the things.
Yes.
But we've forgotten to connect the people to the people.
Yeah.
Like we've connected these two other things and like, look at what we could do.
Yeah.
But we forgot the most important thing, which has been true, for 1,000 years, not just 10 years, which is connecting the people to make sense of any of that other stuff. And
Correct.
I think where a lot of organizations have tons of opportunity is now that we've, connected to all the things and connected all the people to those things, what can we do to connect with our people? Not just to, we've connected to, this platform, Teams, Slack, texting, like 80 things you can list of how we've connected to our employees. But that is not the same as connecting with our employees. And so
and it's not the same as making it simple.
No.
Right?
You said complex. I would go one step further and say complicated. That's a different. Complex is like, ooh, it's kind of elegant. but
isn't that typical
complicated.
to the industry that we
Yeah.
overcomplicate things
Yeah.
because it's mostly designed through like great minds, but usually what I experience is great engineering mindsets, right?
Yeah.
That really want to take deep dives and solve the problem behind the problem. And sometimes that leads, if I look at technology around me, I just look at it simplifies my life. It eliminates decision fatigue. That's what it should be doing. So when I go into factory floors, I've never understood it. My brother, my dad, they all work in the industry. I never understood the lack of engagement, the lack of understanding. Like a lot of technologies, they get invented by people that sit in offices. Like I think what's really different and accelerated, in addition to what you said, the speed of disruption, right? The speed of innovation and disrupting is just picking up and picking up. But because of what's happened in the last decade with technology, you also see that, because we forgot people, we see huge turnover, right, in the workforce. I think the average tenure dropped from 20 years to an average 3 to 6 months in manufacturing. That's not great, right? That's what we should, pick up on and really, help solve. That would be my highest priority. How can we create, from a technology perspective, how can we create technologies that do what you say, engage and connect people for who they are and what they bring to their work?
Yeah. Another analogy there for me is like, I really want engineers, designing the hotel that I'm going to be staying in. But I want interior designers to actually be designing the room itself.
Correct.
Like, I want this thing to be structurally solid and do what exactly a building is supposed to do. And those people are really good at that, but they happen to be terrible at picking out fabrics and colors and
You don't want the
sounds
same team
and lighting,
working on those two tasks.
Exactly. And so sometimes with this high tech platform stuff that we've got now, particularly on the shop floor, it is, really, really high end kind of stuff, but it's forgotten sort of the whole reason it exists, which is the human interface for that and the human experience of trying to, wrestle that thing to the ground every single day.
Yeah.
So here's a question. In 2025, we're here, we're now, things have been disrupted. Things are officially high tech. What is something that you've seen somebody doing recently that actually connects with the front line? Like what's an example of something from a technological perspective that actually does that well and doesn't drop the ball?
Yeah. To me, it is the simplest thing you could possibly do, which is face-to-face communication among the team with the supervisors, the team with their supervisors. Face-to-face gets lost in all of this stuff because it's so easy to digitize everything. But just because you have, high-tech platforms doesn't mean you shouldn't have a high-touch experience. And the best way to have that is face-to-face. Sure, there are communication platforms that allow you to share information, but that's not a high-touch experience. The highest touch experience is face-to-face. So I don't care how automated and glitzy from a technology perspective your plant floor is, you're still going to have to stand around at shift change and talk to each other. And here's what's happened. Here are all the KPIs and the dashboards and everything else that we need to look at. But you have to literally talk about those things. And so the companies that are doing that on a regular basis, I think, are beginning to understand the value of it. And the ones who haven't, that's okay. You can start right now. Why not? Yeah. It's 10:27. How about at 10:30? You can just start at 3 minutes from now and start making a difference.
Just go talk to somebody. I always say it's tech and, right? It's always tech and.
Tech is just a tool. Like if you think about when we think about creating technology, we look at, okay, what is something that, a task you want to accomplish at the front line. We call that a job to be done. Those things that they want to accomplish, the tasks they need to do, they don't change. It's been the same for the last 100 years and the next 30 years. Just the way you do it changes, right? So tech is nothing but a facilitator to simplify how you do the work, but the work itself is still there. It is not going to change. And I think that as our generations evolve, we get different, we get a different dynamic in the workforce. What they expect from work is also different, right? Right now, and I think it's always been that way, but it's more important than ever to engage people in the decision making, in the process creation, involve them in what you do instead of telling them what to do. And I think that face-to-face communication is incredibly important, but that right now people want to not just be recognized for what they deliver, meeting quota or productivity targets, but they want to be recognized for the effort and consistency they put into their work. They want to contribute to the way their shift runs, their line runs, not just simply doing the work. And I think that's a lot of manufacturers don't know how to respond to that yet.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about what works and what we want and what we expect from the front line and from culture. There's a lot of that kind of top-down perspective of, okay, here's what needs to happen. Here's what we want. Here's the results, the ROI, whatever. But I don't think we ask often enough is, what do they want? What can we do that they want and what are they seeking? So that's what I want to pose to you, Jason, as my next question is, I think Willemijn touched on it a little bit, and you touch on it a lot in your writing, is what does the front line want in terms of culture, in terms of that every day I'm here to clock in at 6 a.m. experience, and what do we do to start giving it to them in a better way than we have been?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're doing an engagement survey or something similar to that, that's helpful, but nobody is ever going to tell you the truth on those things. They're just not. Like, my employers ask me this, I'm going to tell them exactly what they want to hear, but whether that's true or not. So take all of those results with a grain of salt. The best way to figure out what your employees want is, ask them. Doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Have them ask each other. Sit in the break room and ask them, go to the shift change meetings and ask them, constantly ask them what's working, what's not working, what would you like, what do you not like. Just, you got to have an understanding of that. Like on the marketing and product side, there's no way in hell anybody would introduce a new product without talking to any of the customers or the prospects and just make this thing and then go, look at what we made for you. And they're like, that's not what we want. But we do that all the time inside the organization. We have to understand who the consumers are, the employees are inside the organization and what they want, and do our best to give that to them. So in return, what we get is productivity and high quality and better customer experience and all the KPIs that we're measuring. And until we fully understand what employees want and how to give them as much of that as we can, we're not going to get those other things, because that's when people talk about engagement, they're holding that back as a punishment. Nobody's going to say it out loud, but they're punishing you by not being more productive because you don't do any sort of work to try to meet them halfway. So it shows up in your engagement. So I'm not going to do any more than I have to because you're not really treating me right. Well, that shows up in 1,000 different ways, particularly on your engagement score. I'm not going to be any more engaged than I have to be until you recognize that I do more than just push a button around here.
So true.
Well said. I'm sensing a theme here, and it sounds like talking to people.
Well, there's talking to people. Everybody's rushing to do all this technology stuff, and we have to, really, truly. This is not I'm not some sort of a Luddite, and I'm against all technology. It has its place, and it's very important. But, artificial intelligence is fantastic. But you know what's better? Actual intelligence. Get out there and be a human and talk to humans the way humans talk, and that will make your artificial intelligence better. But you can't do it without that.
Totally. This is exactly right. I'm the biggest technologist you can get. I'm a huge, that's been my life's work, is to bring technologies that make sense and solve real life problems. But I've always said technology is just, as I said before, it's just a tool. It cannot replace the personal, the human interaction. So it's so true. The models that we use to train any kind of AI are described and made by people. So if you want to have a well-functioning, whatever it is, LLM to train your packaging robot, the only way you're going to achieve it is by understanding what needs to happen, and that you need to learn, observe, you need to talk, that is one thing. And the culture, like we all think this very young, tech savvy workforce wants technology, but the more technologies we bring, the more they're like, I see it in my personal environment, the personal attention, the personal communication, that is what we as humans just, that's our natural habitat. That's what we create.
Yeah. I also happen to think that we don't ask the question, how can technology make actually talking to people easier? We have all these tools to speed things up, to collect data, to aggregate it, to analyze it, and
but it doesn't simplify.
It's always the last thing on the grocery list to, hey, how do we leverage these tools to make this process of human interaction better, faster, more intelligible at scale? So I think that there's something missing there.
Yeah. When I used to work on the corporate side and had, corporate comms teams and stuff, I'd go and ask, hey, have you talked to so-and-so about, this thing or the other? And they'll go, oh, well, I sent them an email.
Yeah. That's not talking.
That's not talking.
Are you aware that you could, if you lean back in your chair and look down, you could see, can see.
Yeah.
Get up, walk down there, tap, tap, tap. Hey, have you got a minute?
No.
Don't send them an email. I call that a me-mail. Just get up and walk down the hall and have the conversation.
So what is the one advice you'd have for how do I say that? If we want to truly understand, like what's keeping people that work on the manufacturing floor up at night, and how can we improve the way they do their work? What is the single most important advice you'd give?
Wow, I got to boil it all down to one thing, huh?
Yeah. It's not emails, that we know.
No. That's right. So I think, moving in all this technology direction and artificial intelligence and digital this and digital all that, we must. It's very helpful, and obviously we can see the results of that. But and you see it in society in general, not just within the four walls of wherever it is you work. The further we go in that direction, the more soulless it feels. And so my one advice would be to put the soul back into it. Like, that doesn't mean stop doing the technology stuff and stop digitizing everything. It means start putting the soul layer back on this soulless feeling that just automatically comes, over Ethernet cables. And if you think about it that way constantly, then it will start to permeate itself in how you communicate, both formally and informally, with all your employees and the communication that they give back to you. Like, it just will automatically go away unless you truly focus on that. It doesn't matter what your role is either. Everybody should be focused on that. But if you don't truly focus on that, it will just continue to leak out of the organization without you doing something to make sure that it doesn't. And that's just reminding yourself and others around you that, hey, until they all take over, the robots aren't in charge, we are. And so we have to make this feel like it's more human than not. Because if we don't, then we'll lose that. And that's what culture is. Otherwise, you just have a digital network. Nobody wants that.
Nope. It doesn't work very well.
Very well said. And in a life where the whole factory floor, if we ever get there, is all robots, they still break down and someone needs to come and fix them. So
that's right. Somebody's got to watch those robots,
Yeah.
And eventually we still but putting the soul back in, I think that is a great just one-liner for the biggest advice we can give to anyone that is using digitization to look at improvement across the manufacturing operations. Where's the soul of this, and how do we put the soul back in?
Yeah, because that's where the passion is. That's where the pride is. That's where engagement is. That's where when I leave the plant floor and I go back home with my family and my friends over the weekend, that's where all of that, brand ambassador and community relations and, building up your CX score and your ENPS score, all the stuff that matters to all these organizations, that's where it comes from.
Yep.
And you got to feed that. You got to feed that.
We talk about turnover, right? That is the biggest, scariest thing facing, manufacturers this week, last week, for a long time now is people are just leaving. People do
Yeah.
not want to stay in a job or in the industry. And I think, people stay in jobs they like.
Yeah, they boil down their entire existence to a dot on a dashboard.
Yeah.
I have more to offer to an organization than just that dot.
Yeah.
And if you can't recognize that, I'm going to try to find some place that will. It's that simple.
That is that reminds me of a saying, and I'm so sorry I forgot who said it. It was during a podcast recording last year. As someone said, every day at 5 p.m., your entire manufacturing operations capital walks out the front door, and you hope they come back the next day, right? That's what we do.
A lot of them don't, but
A lot of them don't. But
that's on
every
you.
day-
That's not on them.
No, so the reality is every day at 5 p.m., everything walks out the front door. So what have you done to make their day a good day? And why would they come back the next day? And I think a lot of us forget that when we sit behind our desk trying to create continuous improvement programs or new, cultural trainings or new tools. We forget that that's what it's all about.
Well, those engagement surveys are the same way. We want to know how engaged you are with us. Well, I would like to know how engaged you are with me. I'd like to give you a score on that. Like, where's that? That's a perspective that the company needs to see.
100%. So we have a bit of time left, and I'm hoping we can get a little spicy here. I want to know if you have any stories, anonymous, of course, about the biggest culture screw up that you've seen in your years consulting, in your years working in manufacturing. What's an example of someone just doing something ass backwards, and what should they have done instead? And if you want to skip this one, that's fine. But I thought I'd at least pose the question. See if I can fish for something.
Well, there's some ways to tell a story without incriminating the guilty or the innocent or whoever they are. The example that comes to mind is on a manufacturing shop floor. Let's pretend for a second, step 1 is way on this side of the building, and step 749 is way on this side of the building. And somebody on step 1 doesn't do something right, and then by the time it gets to step 749, it is so off base that it can't even be recovered because of all those steps in between. And then I've seen it where frontline supervisors, plant managers, SVP, chief operating officer, like all the way up, want to blame the person that is running step 1 or the person that is running step 749, instead of realizing that sometimes that happens because the person at step 1 has no idea what goes on at step 749, right?
Yeah.
And so we do a whole lot of work around onboarding people and training them, and this is your job and you're going to do this, without putting anything else, the rest of the line, the product line, the entire business, into context for them so that they can see their role in whatever your mission, vision, values, purpose, KPIs, quotas, whatever they might be. If they can't see themselves in that, then you can't blame them for not knowing why instead of turning it right 5 degrees, you need to turn it left 5 degrees. And if they ask why, you got to tell them, because it matters. That context matters. And I've worked, 8 or 10 different manufacturers in particular, both directly and indirectly as a consultant. And there's still a lot of that going on. Like if you put that in a sports analogy, you can't ask the people to win the game if A, there's no scoreboard, B, there are no lines on the field or the court that tell them where the field of play is, and C, you don't even tell them what the plays are. You just say, go out and run this play. And they have no idea what we're trying to accomplish, or I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know what these other people are supposed to do. Like, we would never think of doing that if we ran a sports team, but it happens all the time. And I think it's this context and the role, particularly of managers and leaders, of interpreting and translating all that stuff for their employees all the time. So that way, regardless of what your title is, now you've got a bunch of people all across the plant floor who all understand the entire thing, not just a handful of people who come out and ask why it went wrong, but everybody understands all of it. You're much more likely to be successful, and those people are much more likely to feel fulfilled in the process.
Very well said. And I don't have much to add to that.
The only thing I could do, if you want, Chris, is tell you, in my opinion, the most ridiculous product requirement we ever got with
Let's go. Let's hear it.
All right, so there you go. So early days, of course, as we're still developing out the solution of making real-time guidance as simple as possible for frontline workers. We were working on digital step-by-step instructions. One of the questions we got is, hey, can you force it so that a frontline operator has to verify every single step in the digital work instruction? We would like you to connect, we would like to ask for a sign-off on every step, that the system doesn't allow you to proceed to the next step until you've connected the proof that you've done the step. That in combination came with examples of, can you connect a Bluetooth torque wrench so it communicates whether the frontline worker actually exerted the right pressure?
Bluetooth torque wrench.
That sounds like a band. That's
I was
going to
say, that's a rock and roll band right there.
Yeah, rock and roll band.
Prog rock.
Or can you integrate with video observation systems so we can verify it has been done? So these are some of the elements that we came across in our journey over the last 8 to 10 years building out the platform that we have. And by saying, no, right? No. We are here to empower and enable the frontline workers to simplify task execution, but also to achieve empowerment, right? Yeah. So we're constantly in that battle of, people say trust and verify, and we say, like, you want to build in trust, you have to have a culture.
It's a two-way street, right?
It's a two-way street.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Goes both
ways.
When
you were talking about that, that was the first thing I thought was, they want all the control instead of trust. Yeah. That's a trust exercise. Totally.
Yeah. It's a testament to your own leadership in the plant, and if that's not there, then so anyway.
Yeah. Well, very well said.
It's not available, by the way.
Very big thanks to you, Jason. I really appreciate you coming on. Great. Willemijn, really appreciate your knowledge. Thank you for joining us. And Jason, couldn't have done it without you. Great insights. And thank you, everybody, for watching. If you want to talk to Jason, if you want to learn more about him, if you want to get in touch, he has a website, jasonanthoine.com. You can find him and his philosophy over there. So we'll also drop a link to that in the description, in the comments, wherever we're posting this, so that you can all, get in touch and be a part of it together. Cool.
Thanks, Jason. It was really great to be out with you.
Thank you both so much.